What's up, everybody? Welcome to the State of Wild, episode 54, a regular YouTube video web series podcast thingy. My name is Meowth, and as usual, I'm joined by my two good friends, Roffle and Corbett. How are you guys doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. I was feeling a little under the weather earlier in the week, but I think I'm on the upswing and recovering a little bit. How about you, Corb?
Yeah, I was also definitely under the weather. I finally got the jab, got the first dose of the vaccine, which pretty much sent me through the ringer there for a little bit, but very happy I got it and all that kind of stuff, and very much over the hump. And very happy to come onto the show today and talk about a whole bunch of really fun stuff.
Lots of really fun stuff today, but before we dive into all that, we got to take care of our usual housekeeping stuff. You guys know the drill. So first things first, just a reminder to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you guys enjoy our content, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening. Make sure you guys drop that subscription. It's a small thing, but does actually help us a ton.
You can also support us by becoming a patron over on patreon.com/stateofwild and help contribute to help keep the podcast going.
And of course, if you are a patron, you can always link your Patreon and Discord accounts and get a whole bunch of perks when you come join the State of the Wild podcast Discord server. You can also come join the server even if you're not a patron, if you're just a member of the community and you want to come talk a whole bunch of wild Hearthstone.
Alright, so housekeeping stuff out of the way, let's hop into the news for the week. So the first big thing, we obviously had nerfs that occurred on Thursday. So lo and behold, Corbett was smart.
Yep.
Predicted these three nerfs kind of to the T. So we had Apotheosis going from +2/+3 in lifesteal to +1/+3 in lifesteal, if I remember correctly.
+1/+2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, +1/+2.
So basically just a lot less healing, I think specifically in combination with some of the big dragons in Samuro in Standard, but not really affecting our format too much because I think there were no meta lists that were running Apotheosis. I know back in the day we had some builds that were running Apotheosis and Spawn when like Druids and Odd Warriors were super popular, but that's just like, that doesn't exist anymore, so it wasn't seeing any play, so it doesn't really affect our format. We had Renew going from 1 mana to 2 mana, another nerf that Corbett kind of just predicted on the nose. And I think this one will have a little bit more of an impact than the Apotheosis nerf. I don't know if you guys have been messing with 2 mana Renew. I kind of just cut it from all my list, but I don't know if it's still playable. And I think the more important question is, even if we are cutting Renew, are the Xyrella builds of Arena Priest still looking okay?
I mean, I'm not running Renew because I disenchanted mine, so I'm not really high on the list of cards that I play right now. I haven't dried out the Xyrella builds too much. In my experience going against them, I feel like Desperate Prayer seems more relevant than Xyrella, but just having the extra piece is, bound to make some amount of difference. So I don't have enough experience to say for sure on that one.
Yeah, I think the 2 mana Renew is definitely a card. I'm kind of surprised as well just how harsh these priest nerfs were, where the Apoth wasn't a +1/+3, it was down to a +1/+2, and the Renew didn't get any extra healing to make it more in line with something like Flash of Light in Paladin, which is heal for draw a card. So they really wanted to make sure that this kind of stuff wasn't going to be a problem moving forward, and this is some of the harsher nerfs that we've seen actually for some time. For a really long time, actually. Usually they're very gentle.
Okay, so let's put on our tinfoil hat. I know I saw some comments on Reddit and Twitter that they went after these cards specifically so that they weren't hitting any shadow cards, and they really wanted to push the shadow stuff moving into the next expansion. Are you joining these people with their tinfoil hats, or are you just kind of dismissing that whole idea?
I think these. So I think these were just the most obvious correct nerfs, right? Like these are the first ones that we guessed. They basically honestly, you're saying that I got the nerfs right. They basically told us what the nerfs were going to be. Alec had basically outlined exactly what they were wanting to target, and I think it makes a lot of logical sense why you want to hit Samuro Apotheosis and that Reno Jackson level of healing in the format. And Renew, which also has a lot of benefits when you take away its ability to get generated from one maker and the synergy that it has with Xyrella. So I think they were just very explicit. That small shadow thing is an added bonus, but I don't think Raised Dead was a very good nerf target anyway, for a whole bunch of reasons that we already outlined.
Yeah, and I think the only maybe argument you could make is palm reading could probably be nerfed. But first of all, how do you nerf that card without deleting it? And it's a pretty interesting card. It's maybe arguably a little bit too strong. Nerfing spells that are typically run with the palm reading also makes the palm reading worse. And like finally, like even if we do go into the conspiracy theory of they're just trying to push Shadow Priest, like is that a
Not
bad thing?
Yeah.
Like
No.
is it like that? First of all, that's what people want. The community has wanted Shadow Priest for a long time now. And like the problem that people seem to have with Priest right now, in standard at least, is that it doesn't have a win condition other than generating a boatload of cards. So what's wrong with pushing the archetype that has that win condition?
Yeah. I'm gonna let you know, I wasn't in on the tinfoil hat theory. I just wanted to bring it up, all right, and address it, before the community lets us know down in the comments. I will say, I was a fool. I did let my hopes get up last week, because somebody brought up Raised Dead, and I knew that they were never going to nerf Raised Dead, but I was like, it's a possibility. It's a 1% chance. They didn't touch Raised Dead, and I'm a little bit sad, but...
Yeah, I think like Corb said last week, it would just destroy Warlock, which is already struggling in standard as it is, so...
I mean, I shouldn't have gotten my hopes up, but for some reason I let Twitch chat get to me and I got my hopes up, and it's my own fault. And another one that actually kind of hurts a lot. We got Gibberling nerfed from 2 mana to 1. I think this is the one that's going to have the biggest impact on the WoW format, because you have the two different types of token druids, right? You have the aggro and biggin builds, where Gibberling was one of the best cards in that deck, and now Gibberling at 2 mana, you don't want to, right? This is like a voracious reader level of nerf, where like it hits that deck a ton. 1 mana is huge in aggro druids. And the token druid builds, like the slower ones with, Whispering Woods and Glowfly Swarm, there were minion versions running Gibberling, and I mean, again, it's a 1 turn too slow, so you might as well just run the Oaken Summons, which is just a little bit better. So yeah, the Gibberling nerf, I think, has a bigger impact, but I don't think either of those two decks, as we'll talk about a little bit later, neither of those two decks were super popular or super strong, and so they weren't seeing a ton of play, so I don't really know how much of an effect it's going to have on the format.
Yeah, like you said, they're kind of underperforming and as a result fallen off in terms of popularity as well. So the most frequently appearing card of these in Wild maybe, but like still not terribly impactful, which makes sense because these nerfs were aimed at the standard format, and the format looked very different than Wild does. So
yeah,
mostly expected.
Yeah. All right, so we had 3 nerfs that don't look like they're going to, really do anything in our format. So let's go ahead and stop talking about them. Let's talk about a new card instead. So we weren't supposed to get any cards until the 20th, but it turns out we got a special spoiler from our friends over at the Coin Concede podcast. But we have a new card. It's called Touch of the Nathrezim. It's a 1 mana shadow spell. Already a little bit spooky because Tamps and Roam exist. All right, just shadow spell synergy there. But it's a 1 mana spell that deals 2 damage to a minion. If that minion dies, restore 4 health to your hero. So obviously there's conversations immediately about its potential in something like Darkglare Warlock. So I'm just going to let Corb, you're the resident Darkglare expert here. Does this card fit?
Yeah, it's really good. This card's really strong. I can say this in pretty much every Warlock deck that isn't just the aggro decks. Like the mana difference is so important. You actually get more healing compared to the Drain Soul. And so yeah, it's really significant. If Penflinger was still a card, this would be kind of disgusting actually, being able to like Penflinger and then finish it off and then bounce the Penflinger and things like that. So fortunately that's not a thing. But yeah, really, really strong card. I expect that it will probably make it into the list because it's cheaper and it works incredibly well with Tamsin. In more aggressive matchups and burn matchups, being able to drop a Tamsin and this like on 4 and heal for 8, killing 2 things, that's pretty nasty, like if you need to go down that road.
I do think that it'll see playing Darkglare. Even in like the slower matchups, it's fine, right? Because you were like, I think Rain of Fire was being used to kill off your like 2/1s and 1/1s to put them in your Raised Dead pool in certain matchups, and this kind of does that same effect. A little bit more expensive than something like Rain of Fire, but you can use that in that matchup. And I also, like you mentioned, other Warlock decks. Like I love this card in Reno Lock. In a super heavy aggressive meta, I was running like the Unstable Fellbolts, and I think this is just 100% better. The one, I guess, hesitation I have is the health breakpoint between 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. And that might matter more in Darkglare Warlock, but when you're looking at Reno Lock, and you have stuff like Plague of Flames, Defile, Dark Skies, Hysteria, all that stuff anyways, I don't really think that there's that big of a deal. And you still run Drain Souls in Reno Lock, so I really like this in Reno. Kind of scared of what it's going to do in Darkglare, just because, Darkglare, as we'll talk about, best deck in the format, so a little bit spooky.
Yeah, I think people consistently underrate the significance of even a single mana cost in terms of evaluating a card, and the fact that you're getting very nearly the same card as Drained Soul for one less mana makes a big difference. Like you said, with Reno Lock, you're probably just running both because they're both good. But like, I think it makes a legitimate argument in terms of Dark Glare, in terms of which one is better and which one is worth running, especially a deck that wants to be online at the speed of Dark Glare. But yeah, generally it looks like a pretty good card, and that's maybe what something that Warlock needs in Standard right now. But it's got a bit of an embarrassment of riches in Wild, so like it's always concerning when they need to print cards for a format where Warlock is struggling, because Warlock has consistently been one of the best classes in Wild and regularly has a great many good decks.
Yeah, so just add this to the pile of really, really good cards that we've already seen from United and Stormwind. Already like 20 cards in, shaping up to be a pretty exciting expansion. And just a reminder that the rest of the card reveals will resume on the 20th, like we thought. And so hopefully next week and the week after, we'll have a ton of stuff to talk about. Yeah, it's really hard to evaluate like cards and decks when we've only seen, 1/10 of the cards that we're going to be talking about from a brand new expansion. So as we go on and move forward, we'll have a little bit more of an idea of, what archetypes are getting pushed and how they're going to look in our format. All right, so let's move on from new cards to kind of the impact of the cards that we have. So we're going to spend a little bit of time here before we hop into the second half of our episode talking about the new Vicious Syndicate report that's coming out on Sunday. So of course, Corbett and I do help write this report, so we had access to this data, and we wanted to talk about it a little bit and spoil it for you guys that are listening. So of course, we're going to be doing a little bit of a really brief overview. If you guys want more detailed explanations or different rank brackets, or just want to know a little bit more about specific decks that we're talking about, we highly recommend that you guys check out the actual written report. The link to that will be down in the description, so make sure you guys check that out if you're interested. So let's go ahead and hop into the first graph here. Let's talk about our popularity. We're going to be talking about Legend ranks specifically today. So this is looking at all ranks within Legend. And let's talk about our popularity. So of course, Mage, most popular. Right? No surprise here. It's primarily Secret Mage, but we're seeing a pretty significant presence of Arena Mage and APM Mage, which is now a mix of the Flamewaker and Mizaki variants. And then moving into Warlock, we've got Reno Lock and Dark Glare, and then we've got small pockets of other decks. And then Shaman, this is like the big story that we've been talking about. Corbett's been mentioning HS Replay stats. We have now Vicious Syndicate Report stats to kind of help back up that claim that Shaman went from basically unplayable to okay at the beginning of Fortune of the Barons with Murloc Shaman, and now with Primal Dungeoneer, holy crap, there is so much Shaman on ladder. It's up there with Warlock and Mage. So I think this is like the first point where we can just stop and talk about, like, damn, Shaman is popular. We're not even going to talk about the power levels. Shaman is popular. We've got not only the Murlocs, but we've got the Shutterwalk builds that are, pure combo or Reno combo. You've got elemental aggro builds. We've got the actual like mid-rangey elemental Gallicon builds. So lots of different Shaman archetypes all seeing play. It's pretty exciting, actually.
Yeah, this is kind of what we've been talking about for weeks, right? But like still seeing it at 0.1% away from Warlock in terms of popularity in the Wild format is pretty astounding. It's been a while since Shaman was this relevant in the format, so.
Yeah, for sure. It's been pretty rare that the non-Cabal classes really are ever up there. Like it's usually those three that is dominating all the time. Sometimes some decks can pop up here and there, but to see Shaman be this diverse and this popular at Legend ranks, at significantly high ranks, it's very exciting, right? It's great. It's a diverse class, and it just makes the format, I think, feel a lot more fresh. So no, it's been great. We've been talking about this for a while.
I wonder how much of it, again, as we move in to the next expansion, I wonder how much of this is just due to the fact that it's got like new cards and it was like the only class that did. I mean, when we talk about the actual power rankings, it's a little bit of both, right? New stuff plus it being powerful, but sorry to me.
Yeah, I think that's definitely like a big part of it is just because Wild didn't get a ton from the mini set, and again, I think it's why Stealer Warlock was so popular at the time. And why it was ultimately a huge problem was because people just wanted to play it and it was new. And Shaman was the only other thing that really got like completely new stuff. And so I think moving forward though, you know, for reasons we'll get into, I think Shaman though still does have a lot of lasting power, you know, in Wild.
Yeah. I mean, let's just like run through the rest of it. I mean, Priest is no surprise, right? Reno, Big Priest, same old, same old. God, I really hope the Shadow Priest does something to shake up Priest in our format.
Give it something, dude. Like we talk about this in the report, but it's been like over a year since Priest has had any archetype. Basically, since the Raza Reaver, the Priest has had any other third archetype that's been remotely relevant. It's just been these exact 2-cent strategies every single expansion, and they've been performing fine every single expansion. And so yeah, it's just getting a little tiresome.
You know, it doesn't look like it registered on the report, but I have been seeing an uptick in the number of Interfire combo priests recently.
Yeah,
There's some lists running around at reasonably high legend, and I was surprised at how well the list performed with Power Word Fortitude being included. So something to keep an eye on. I'm sure there's plenty of refinement to be done there, but you know, third archetype for priest isn't necessarily a bad thing. And then with the expansion, we're bound to see some you know, some theory crafting and experimentation within the class.
Speaking of experimentation, I mean, when we get to Rogue, this is where we always talk about how Warlock's the most diverse class in the format when it comes to archetypes. Rogue is maybe like fighting Warlock for that claim. Their archetypes are not nearly as good as Warlock archetypes, but there are a lot of Rogue archetypes. We've seen a lot of, I think, obviously Kingsbane and Odd Rogue, but we always see a ton of Thief Rogue, probably thanks to Roffle. We always see a ton of Mill Rogue. And I think the big thing is we've been seeing a lot of Shark Rogue with Shatter Concealment. We'll talk about the power level of these archetypes you know, in a little bit here, but Rogue's got a lot of experimentation going on, and a lot of pretty fun archetypes, you know, even if they're not super powerful. And then, I mean, the rest kind of same old, same old. I mean, Druid, Warrior, Paladin, Hunter, Demon Hunter, kind of popularity still remains super low. Hand buff Paladin, you know, we talked about last time how it was super insanely powerful, and then it got nerfed. But nobody was really playing hand buff Paladin to begin with, so that drop off in power level didn't make the biggest impact on Paladin, unfortunately. But yeah, before we move on from the popularity to the power rankings, is there anything else you guys want to talk about that stood out to you guys as super surprising?
It looks like Demon Hunter finally got a second deck, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But you know, seeing the popularity there be not just a single bar for once is kind of nice.
Yeah, I mean, let's hop into that. Let's talk about the power rankings here. So I'm going to run through the power rankings really quickly, and then we can talk about our surprises. So sitting at the top of tier 1 in Legend, should be no surprise, it is Darklord Warlock, followed up by Seeker Mage, Odd Paladin, and Kingsbane Rogue. So 3 pretty powerful aggro decks. And then wrapping up tier 1, I'm going to take this short minute. Corbett and I are going to do a little bit of a victory lap here. Sitting at the bottom of tier 1 is this beautiful deck called Even Hunter. Beautiful. It's validation. Feels really good. And then let's talk about tier 2. We've got Murloc Shaman, Odd Demon Hunter, Reno Lock, Pirate Warrior, Reno Priest, Death Rattle Demon Hunter, Discard Warlock, and Hand Buff Paladin. And then tier 3, we have the Elemental Aggro Shamans. We have the variety of Reno Mages, both Secret and LPG. The variety of Celestial Alignment Combo Druids, Big Priest, Shutterwalk Shamans, so this is both Reno and non-Reno, Tax Paladin, and Token Druids. And then tier 4, once we get down to the memes, we've got Reno Hunter, Dead Man's Hand Warrior, APM Mage, which includes both Flamewaker and Mizaki, Odd Warrior, Beast Hunter, Jade Druid, and then the trifecta of meme rogue decks in Shark Rogue, Thief Rogue, and Mill Rogue. I mean, do you guys just want to start off with Even Hunter and its kind of debut at tier 1?
Yeah, so Even Hunter was really fun to look at when we got all the stats for this, and it makes a lot of sense when you actually dig into the matchups. So Even Hunter is basically the best counter on ladder, arguably, against both Secret Mage and Darklord Warlock at the same time. And so that's like a really great position to be in, right? Like, it's great, and it can give you a lot of high level success at the Legend bracket and at the bottleneck to Legend. Its matchup spread is also very positive into a lot of the combo jank decks that are around on ladder. So things like Alignment Druid and Shark Rogue and APM Mage. And so there's a lot of that kind of stuff that it beats up. Basically, its matchup spread looks a lot like if Tax Paladin and Secret Mage had a baby. With all the good and bad that it has with it. It does have bad matchups in things like Pirate Warrior and Murloc Shaman, but ultimately, because those decks aren't that popular, it ends up breaking out as a really, really strong deck overall. And just has like that, that Tax Pally Secret Mage-esque matchup spread, which is great. So even Hunter may be the most underrated deck of the format right now, and definitely a little bit of a meta breaker, given just how good it is against some of the most oppressive or best stuff out there.
In my experience as well, I had a very fast climb with Even Hunter just this past month, and that matchup against Secret Mage and Dark Lair Warlock definitely does check out, especially if you're running the Web Lords, which was part of Tax Paladin's biggest advantage into those decks, because they rely so heavily on those Battlecry minions that it really slows them down quite a bit, in addition to being able to just race them in the case of Dark Lair as well.
I just want to say, call this 3 months out. I've been a believer. All right, I've been championing this deck for a while, and so it's really, really exciting to see it actually have tier 1 power levels that's not just like made up in my head. So
yeah, I feel like I might have undersold that. Like, Hunter has a tier 1 deck. Hunter has a tier 1 deck in Wild. I feel like that was sort of I kind of blew past that a little bit. It's kind of insane, right? We actually got one.
So this is the first time, I think, since the very beginning of the WoW format, when we had like mid-range Hunter, right? Back in the day with piloted Shredders. I think this is the first time Hunter's had like a tier 1 deck.
It had Secret Hunter. It had Secret Hunter, I believe, in the year of the Raven. Is that the name of what was the Witchwood year? Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, Year of the Raven. So I think there were Secret Hunters that were in a similar position where they were very underplayed, but VS reports had them quite high. But it's been a long time, right? We're talking about literal years here. So
any other surprises? I think we can just hop down to tier 2 with this brand new Death Rattle Demon Hunter. Corbett, you kind of took a closer look at these lists and what was seeing play, and you did mention this a little bit. It's very similar to the standard counterpart, which is kind of inclusion of powerful wild Death Rattles and Death Rattle synergies.
Yeah, it's basically very similar to the standard builds. There are also a smattering of Reno Death Rattle Demon Hunters as well, which are included in this, but it's a smaller percentage. But it's very close to standard, except with a sprinkling in of some wild cards, which are like N'Zoth and Pilot Shredder and Bad Luck Albatross. And I think that last one's really important because happens to be a lot of Reno decks in Wild. And, the Death Rattle Demon Hunter looks like it's pretty well-rounded overall. It does get blown out by snowballing aggro. So, again, things like Murloc Shaman, Pirate Warrior. But it does really well, or reasonably well, into, Reno decks in general, and also in matchups where its stickiness is relevant. So it's actually like pretty good into Secret Mage, funnily enough, because explosive runes can't really keep it off the board, and all those Death Rattles just allow it to maintain ball control against that deck. So yeah, Death Rattle Demon Hunter though was a big shock. Like I was surprised when I saw it, and I know that behind the scenes people were surprised. But it's interesting, right, when you get kind of this little revelation, and I definitely think that it just highlights the potential of that package, and it definitely deserves a lot more attention than it's been getting. And it's exciting, right, that we actually got like another very, very high-performing Demon Hunter deck that isn't just a Demon Hunter for the first time. This is like a big milestone for the class and the format as a whole.
Yeah, I once again tinkered around with some Reno Death Rattle Demon Hunter, and it was confused and surprised at how well I was doing with it, because like on paper it seemed like this deck plays way too fair, but then you think about some of the mana that you're cheating, and like you said, the stickiness of the deck, like it's makes sense. I can't speak to the non-Reno version, but with the Reno version, you have the advantage of Zephrys in there as well to clear up some of those snowballing minions, in particular Murlocs. So pleasantly surprised to see it doing so well. That it's a fun shell. There's something satisfying about just jamming a 7 mana Death Speaker down and having those minions shoot out of your deck.
Yeah, as much praise as I want to take for Even Hunter, I do have to take my L's here, because I was one of those people that was like, this deck just feels too fair. This deck doesn't feel like it does enough in our format, but it does seem that it's like the deck itself feels like it has potential. I don't know I don't know if it'll, as more people start playing the deck, I don't know if it'll stick around, but I mean, like you mentioned, the shell is there, and it's something to look at going forward, right? So it's no longer hey, this card is not odd costed, so we can't pay attention to it. It's, well, this card is not odd costed, and it doesn't have a death rattle, so maybe now we ignore it. We can extend our parameters for evaluating Demon Hunter cards a little bit. And then while we're talking about Tier 2, I want to talk about Hamburg Paladin, because I think people just completely abandoned this deck after it got nerfed, right? It got Crab Rider, First Day of School, and Hand of a Doll all nerfed. And so while it was by far and away one of the best decks we have ever seen in the format, the nerfs did hit it a lot, but it looks like it's still a very respectable deck. When it comes to climbing the wild ladder, it has a very, strong win rate still. It's still something to pay attention to, even after all of those nerfs. And I do think it's, all those cards that got nerfed are all candidates for unnerfs in 6 months. So keep an eye on it when all those unnerfs happen as well.
Yeah, it's easy to write off a deck when it takes that many hits, but it's still definitely more than capable.
And finally, we do have a low sample tier estimate of a handful of decks. So these decks weren't popular enough to get a confident idea of their power score, but we do have a good idea of where they would roughly land. And let's start at the bottom. So tier 3 placement, we had Odd Rogue. So fallen off a little bit, still okay, but not amazing. Tier 2, we had Cute Warlock. So if you want to go play some cute little minions, turns out they're actually still pretty good. So same as where it was in the prior report in that Tier 2. But the big story is Tier 1 estimate. A Tier 1 deck that no one is playing enough to get it on the actual tier list. Gallicon Shaman. Gallicon Shaman is one of the absolute best decks in the format, and people are not playing it. So that's another deck that we have been championing on the show for some time now. Gallicon Shaman, by far and away, the best option if you want to be playing the Shaman stuff, yet it's the most underplayed option, which is always funny. So yeah, Gallicon Shaman, another sort of sleeper, and really vying with Even Hunter as the biggest sleepers and most underplayed decks currently on ladder.
Yeah, I think that's proof that not enough people are listening to this podcast, because those
are
the two decks that we have been championing for weeks now, and turns out they're good, and both are criminally underplayed. I mean, even I don't think we talked much about the popularity, but I imagine Even Hunter is barely registering outside of the low sample tier. It's not the most popular Hunter deck right now. So those two decks are very strong and criminally underplayed for how good they are.
Yeah, Even Hunter was it was so close to not making it. It was so tight. It had a sub 1% play rate at Legend. And so yeah, it barely made it on there.
And so just to clarify what the Gallicon Shaman builds that we're talking about here are, these are the non-combo Shuttle Walk versions of the build, right? So these are just decks that run that elemental package, that are really, really good against board-based aggro with those mid-game board-based swings with stuff like Earth Revenant, Lily Pad Lurker, and the Gallicon itself. And then you have the Shuttle Walk in there in most builds just to kind of help, solidify if you need it, like another layer of threats. But yeah, I mean, I think the elemental package is just something that we've been sleeping on for a while in our format. I know it's getting a lot of attention in standard, and a lot of people I think weren't too high on it, but it's showing that this elemental core, when combined with good wild cards, is pretty damn powerful.
Power of power creep. All standard decks can be wild viable, Meowth. So it doesn't matter how many standard cards are in your deck. It's fine. It's fine.
It totally matters, dude. The YouTube comments and the Twitch chat comments every time I play a Paladin deck or a Shaman deck, it totally does matter. Okay. All right. So that's it for the Vicious Syndicate Report talk on our podcast episode today. Again, if you want any further details about popularity, power rankings, deck lists, specific decks, all that kind of good stuff, highly recommend you guys check out the actual written report. Again, the link to that will be down in the description below. All right, so let's move on to the second half of the episode, something that we're a little bit excited to do, our little Mailbag AMA episode. So again, last week we asked you guys to leave us all of your questions, right, whether on the YouTube comments or in our Discord. And so we've picked the best of the best, and I think it's gonna be a little bit more laid back, a little bit more relaxed. And we're just gonna hang out and answer some of these questions that you guys had. So let's hop right into it. Let's talk about kind of how we got into Hearthstone. So the first question comes from Ian. What got each of you to start playing Hearthstone, and what got each of you to start streaming it? So kind of a two-part question here.
I'll go first. Originally, actually, my brother introduced me to Hearthstone. He knew that I was a big fan of card games. I was playing Magic the Gathering at the time, and I had also played a lot of WoW, but was on kind of a hiatus from both of them because I was trying to finish up school, so I didn't have a lot of time or money. So he was like, "Hey, you should try out Hearthstone." So I think it was in closed beta at the time, so I submitted a beta application around Thanksgiving, I think, when he suggested it, and by Christmas it was all I was doing because I was already in, and from the first time I started playing it, I was hooked, and I've been essentially playing it ever since. So it's the perfect combination of my love of the Warcraft world and card games.
Yeah, I also was big into card games for a bit, where I grew up on Yu-Gi-Oh! And basically in my final year of high school, I remember that I was meant to go around to a friends who were meant to do homework, but we found his old collection of Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, and so we just procrastinated, didn't do any homework, and just stayed up all night playing with those. And then a year later, we're all at university and stuff, we all moved away, and he's picked up Hearthstone, and he got me to try it, and another all-nighter occurred of playing Hearthstone. So I remember picking the game up there, just through a friend, and been playing it ever since. In terms of the streaming, like what got me into streaming, I don't know. I'd been like a high-ranked player for some time, and a few people had asked if I wanted to stream, but I was always way too nervous and things like that. And then once I finished school, I mean, the truth was I was like pretty depressed and stuff at the time, and I wanted to feel like I was going to do something constructive. And this is something that I felt I wanted to do and put my time into, and I just kicked it off, and I'm very, very happy that I started.
I'm very happy that you started as well. I mean, what got me into starting playing Hearthstone? So, again, I grew up on card games. I grew up on Pokemon. So, I didn't play Magic. I didn't play Yu-Gi-Oh! I played Pokemon. And so, yeah. And then our friend group that I was, hanging out with all the time, playing games with, we kind of shifted away from card games. We were playing a lot of, like, FPSs and MMOs. And stuff like that. And so, it wasn't until I was, moving away to college, got introduced to Hearthstone, and I was playing super casually. Like, I was playing Face Hunter. I was one of those like Face Hunter and Zulok guys that played and got to like rank 10, and like rank 10 back in the old system was like a big deal for me because I played super casually. And so this was like, I got into it around Nax, when Nax released. So this was after beta. I was a latecomer to Hearthstone, and then I like started taking it super seriously when like Blackrock Mountain came out, which like Patron Warrior was like, I was like, holy shit, this deck is so cool. And so like that's when I really started playing super seriously. And then what got me into streaming it was actually like, so when Wild originally became a format, I was like kind of intrigued by it, but there was like very few people who actually streamed like Wild Hearthstone. At that time, it was like Dane and like Control were like the two people that streamed Wild. And I was like super big into Twitch at the time anyways, because I was a college student. Like, I was watching a lot of other games, and there was just nobody that was playing Wild. So I was like, screw it. Like, there's nobody to watch, so I might as well start streaming.
Yeah.
And so that's just kind of how it happened. And I'm like, again, this was like 4 years ago. Didn't start taking streaming super seriously until like 2.5, 3 years ago. But again, very happy that I got into Hearthstone and started streaming it as well. Roffle, yeah. I don't think you told your streaming story. Do you want?
I know. I think I missed that. So my streaming origin story is that it's kind of similar to Corb's actually, which may be a surprise to some people. I actually was primarily like an arena gamer just because I mentioned I was just finishing up school, so I was a little broke, so I was a free to play gamer. And then the first Wild Open was announced, and I was like, well, that seems kind of interesting. I like that they had like clearly defined rules for who gets to qualify in the tournament, and so I'm like, you know what, I'll give it a try. I've hit Legend a few times. How hard can it be? The few times I've ventured into Constructed, that is. So I queued up my Evolve Shaman deck, which was a 30 card standard list, and I think I finished in like the 30 or so, called it a night, and qualified for the tournament. I did reasonably well in the tournament. I think I got top 16 in NA before dropping out, and I don't know, it was just kind of a confidence boost from there. I was just like jamming Secret Mage before Luneth existed, and Firelands Portal was the top end, and hitting single digits with that for a while until I was finally just like, you know what, I might as well stream it. And kind of like Corba, I was really nervous at first, and I think like the first few months of streaming, I don't think I streamed without like a tumbler of whiskey at my side just to ease some of the nerves. I quickly realized that was maybe not the best idea for my for the sake of my liver, and have shifted away from that, which is especially good now that I do morning streams. But haven't quite looked back, and have been enjoying it quite a bit since then. And now it's my full-time gig, so pretty cool.
People don't know about the High Legend Roffle origin story. That's a secret from the comics that you might not know about.
I mean, I just kind of want to extend this question for me, and I guess like now that we're streaming it, like how is your, I guess, confidence grown? I'm assuming it has, I guess, because like at least when I started streaming, it was like super nerve-wracking. I'm not a super extroverted person anyways, like I'm super introverted, and so for me it's like streaming was like, oh, every time I like ended stream I was like, oh my god, I'm exhausted. And I was like super nervous about everything. So how's that experience kind of been for you over the past couple of years for both of you guys?
It's still emotionally exhausting and draining because you're in front of a camera talking to people for hours on end, but it's doing something that I love, so I enjoy it still, and it's definitely worth the energy drain that it involves. I think the biggest thing that has changed from when I started streaming versus now is partially due to my priorities when I'm streaming, or when I'm playing Hearthstone in general now, is that I used to fixate on playing perfectly when I was first starting out, because I was hyper concerned about people, calling out misplays or something along those lines, just because, your attention's not quite there. But as I've streamed more, I've realized that's not necessarily the reason why people come to streams. Is like a stream is a show, it's entertainment. Like there are people that definitely seek that out, and there are streamers for them, but like I'm not that streamer, so letting go of that and letting go of the concern for that has like freed up my mental state to be more focused on putting on an entertaining show rather than optimal play, which I'm certainly not capable of even when I'm not streaming. So that's I think the biggest change for me.
Yeah, streaming in general I think has helped a lot in terms of what you're outlining, in terms of like confidence and public speaking and things like that. I am probably like a pretty introverted person and quite anxious and things like that, and I still get emotionally drained out, like Roffle was saying. After streams, I'm exhausted after a stream, even if it's only like a couple hours. And that just, that's just my social battery, right? Like it drains out pretty quickly. Even if there's no one else in the room, I'm still communicating and talking and on camera, and it is exhausting. But overall, it's been a huge positive. That's a combination of, I think, well, it's a combination of where I was at the time when I started streaming. Like I outlined earlier, I was kind of in a pretty poor mental state at the time. And so whether that's a combination of streaming itself or just, things getting better over time. Either way you look at it, right now I feel a lot better about things. And I think it's just been a huge, huge positive overall, and helped in a whole bunch of ways.
Yeah, totally agree with a lot of that. I'm still finding it hard to like detach myself from, because I guess when I originally started streaming, I was kind of in a similar boat to where Roffle is now, where I was like playing a mix of like good stuff and a lot of off meta jank and stuff like that. And then as I've gone on, I'm like, my mental now, like, I don't know if it's a side effect of like where the Hearthstone meta has developed into, where like it personally felt really, really bad to like queue up these decks and be queuing into stuff like Secret Mage and Dark Lair and kind of having no chance in those games. So I've kind of transitioned more into I play good stuff more often than not, and so it becomes, my mental has kind of developed. It was like, okay, I should be paying more attention to how I'm playing, even though like I'm not the best player. I know that I'm not a good player. and so then it becomes me trying to hyperfixate on that. So I guess I have like had the opposite development of how Roffle's kind of developed streaming. So let's move on to our next question here. Let's talk about what aspect of Hearthstone kind of drew you in, and then what keeps you coming back. I know, Roffle, you kind of have built your livelihood on this, so I'm assuming that's part of what keeps you coming back. But I know you said that you love the game, so like, what specific parts about Hearthstone do you really, really love that make you like excited to play the game every day?
Yeah, it's something that's kind of seen as a negative or detriment to the game is its simplicity. But in reality, like, distilling something down to its simplest form is, I don't know, kind of beautiful in a way. The simplicity of Hearthstone makes it accessible. And then on top of that, you have very beautiful visuals and fun animations associated with that make it a really appealing game to just watch. So as a streamer, like, it feels hard to stream a game that I wouldn't personally want to watch. So that's a big part of what makes me coming back, and I imagine what keeps the audience back and engaged is that simplicity makes for a good viewing experience. There isn't a whole lot of things going on. The numbers are there on the cards when they're on the board, and then just the variety of different outcomes that it can happen within Hearthstone. Some of that is the wild RNG that people don't necessarily like with competitive play necessarily, but I enjoy it. The unexpected can happen within Hearthstone, and I like pushing the limits of that sometimes. So it's a combination of again the accessibility, simplicity of the game, as well as like the variety of outcomes that are possible.
Yeah, I mean, personally, yes, I was drawn to Hearthstone for like the simplicity, the art, the animations. Like, I will say Hearthstone has some of the best art that I've ever seen in all of these card games, so I think that's something that appeals to me. I've recently got back into Magic to kind of help satisfy my want for those more complex interactions and decks and game states and stuff like that. But I mean, in the end, I come back to Hearthstone just because it's really, really easy to pick up, and it's really, really easy and nice, like you said, to play and watch. So let's move on to our next question here, though. We've talked a lot about what drew us into Hearthstone, and looking back, what have been some of your favorite decks of all time? And I can go ahead and start with this one, because I started off playing super seriously back in Blackrock Mountain, and this was kind of the spawn of like the Demon Handlock decks as like the response to Patron Warrior. And I still remember that Demon Handlock was like the first like real, I say real because like I had played Face Hunter and Zulok, but this was like the first real Hearthstone deck that I had owned. It was super fun, and it's kind of what drew me into like Warlock to begin with, that I've like had an affinity for moving forward in all these other metagames. So I think Demon Handlock has been my favorite deck of all time, and probably still is, but LPG mages have been giving it a run for its money in the past year or so. So I would say definitely one of those two decks.
For me, it would have to be either Weasel Priest, because I love torturing my opponents, and that's the best way to do so. Or I think when Vargoth was first released, the very first thing that I did with him was a quest mage deck that took multiple turns in order to shuffle 60 Deck of Wonders into my deck, and then let the chaos ensue. So that was have led to some of the most fun games of Hearthstone I've ever played. So that's got to be up there as well.
Yeah, I think I have to go with Tempo Rogue, like Kaliseth Rogue, when it was the standard in Frozen Throne. I love that deck so much. Like, I played so many different variants of that. I was basically like bodybuilding at the time, where I would just play the same deck for months on end, but just keep on swapping out and getting weirder and weirder with the deck choices and things like that. But yeah, I absolutely adored that deck in that era of the game.
Yeah, can we extend this question for a little bit? What was your first deck that you ever hit Legend in Wild with? Do you remember that?
Oh, in
deck?
Wild?
Yeah,
in Wild my first ever deck in Wild, it was Pirate Warrior, because I was bored of... This actually happened in KFT at the exact same time that I was playing Tempo Rogue, because the meta was nothing but Jade Druid, Tempo Rogue, and Kazakus Priest, and I played so much of that for 3 months that I was done. And so I had to Google the only Wild play that I knew at the time, which was Control. And I went to his Twitter, and he had 87 Pirate Warrior lists on his Twitter page. And so I just net decked that. and walked into top 10 legend with Pirate Warrior, and then I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then I got dragged back in, and here I am now playing Wild all the time.
I still remember the first time I hit Legend in Wild was that Wild Open month, and I hit it with like a homebrew like Jade Elemental Shaman with like Kalamos on the top end, just because like Shaman was still like super powerful, and I was just like running. This was like right after they had made Jade Spirit like an elemental, I think. So like there was that whole synergy there, and then of course like the dragon like Spiteful Priest with Draconid Operatives and Dustbreakers and stuff like that. So those are the first decks I hit Legend with in Wild. I'll have a soft spot for Draconid Operative, probably forever, just because that card is absolutely insane. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit. We're talking a lot about our history in Wild and in Hearthstone. So let's answer some of these questions that people had about Wild specifically as a format. So the first question comes from Nin City. So given the history of Demon Hunter throughout Wild and the huge difference in the amount of cards between it and the classes that have been around since the start, do you believe that it'll ever be possible for a new class to be able to catch up to the strength of other classes? And if another one was added in the future, would it be healthy for the Wild meta? I mean, I can go ahead and just start that, like, even though it doesn't have the level of cards that every other class has, Demon Hunter has kind of proven itself to be competitive in our format. So, even if a new class gets added in the future, I would expect something similar to happen. I would say that I'd be down for like a mini, like 30 card mini expansion for Wild for like Demon Hunter cards. I know that's something that they probably will never do, but to give it kind of more options, rather than just what we're seeing in Standard as playable archetypes in our format. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but I do think that it's definitely possible for new classes to catch up with the strength, right? With just the examples that we have in Demon Hunter. I just don't think that the diversity of the class, will be possible for an extended period of time. But the strength itself, I don't think is a question.
I mean, yeah, just look at day one odd Demon Hunter, and I feel like that answers the question alone in terms of the relative strength. Like, it's certainly possible for new classes to come in and be relevant. Like, it doesn't take that much for an archetype to pop up in an existing class, or like we talked about, their decks that you could just bring over from Standard primarily and still do reasonably well with them, is the case with Death Rattle Demon Hunter. I think maybe not in terms of its relative strength in the format, but like what feels kind of bad when they do introduce new classes is the lack of options, and even just which, when you have fewer cards, you can have fewer options, but not even that. Like you mentioned, Demon Hunter is the obvious example, but like Demon Hunter doesn't have a hero card. Demon Hunter doesn't have a quest. And so it just kind of feels a little bit left out in that regard. But I think that's something that over time, like Hearthstone card games exist for a very long time. I think that's something that over time will maybe get shored up as new expansions come out.
Yeah. It's also not like the majority of cards. More cards does not mean more playable cards, right? And you should only really be thinking about the playable cards when it comes to options and diversity in the format. It doesn't really matter if Mage got a whole bunch of cards in 2016 if the majority of those cards are completely irrelevant compared to what Demon Hunter has. I think with the power creep that happens, which is fine by the way, like you want there to be powerful cards. The new classes definitely have the ability to catch up. What we've seen currently is that Demon Hunter got very lucky that Baku worked very well with its particular hero power in the first year. But we're already here in year 2, and it's kind of already caught up. Like we've already talked about another viable deck, and I think that Reno decks in general kind of open up the field because they give all the classes kind of a pretty viable baseline of power level. And so if they ever introduce anything new, it'll probably always have that Reno option to fall back on a little bit, or the Baku or Gen option, no matter what. So those are definitely foundations until it gets a little bit of a wider card pool.
So our next question comes from T-Rexon, who asked, looking at this expansion, I love seeing that just a little bit more support has completely revitalized Shaman. What class, if any, do you think needs more support in Wild currently? And what is that class missing that other classes have? So I kind of just want to steal a little bit of Roffle's answer from the last one with like Demon Hunter. Feels like it's missing a lot of these different archetypes, right? Like it's missing a hero card, it's missing a quest, it's missing a little bit more diversity. But then I guess besides Demon Hunter, I don't really know what other classes need a ton of support. I know a lot of people want me to say Hunter and like would be expecting Hunter as an answer here, but I feel like Hunter has a bunch of these like it's sitting where Shaman was just before this prior expansion, where it's got a bunch of really, really powerful tools, and it's just missing that like one or two cards that like ties it together and makes the class super powerful. So yeah, I'm not sure that anything needs a whole lot more support, like other than like specific archetypes that I would like personally like to see buffed. But I don't know if a class as a whole needs a ton of help.
Yeah, I think sometimes people get fixated with a class or deck needing something very specific when the answer is good cards. Like, what does this need? Oh, it needs good cards. And that can come in a variety of different ways for a variety of different archetypes. It doesn't take very much for anything to get buffed. If Blizzard wants a certain archetype playable, they can make it playable however they want. There's a lot of options. And so I think, though, in general, though, Wild, all the classes are fine, right? Like, I think every class feels like it can do something. That feels great. Wild is incredibly diverse in terms of the archetypes that do see play. It's great that there is pretty much one or two decks at minimum, if not like 3 to 4, for almost every class in the format. And so I think overall it's in a really healthy place. And I think that the Reno decks, as much as I don't like the Highlander mechanic that much, I think that definitely helps diversity. And so I think, you know, like if you want to see different decks get stuff in the future and get support, well, they just need good cards rather than anything very specific. It's not like you need an exact healing or removal or whatever. Just good stuff is good.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, we touched on it earlier. In addition to Hunter, like it has a few archetypes that are almost there, which I feel like is pretty similar to where Shaman has been in the past, where it's had like one staple that you're kind of forced to play if you want to play the class. But I think the other one that we alluded to earlier was Priest, where you're kind of choosing between essentially two options. It feels like right now, and that maybe will change in hopefully the near future. But like just to reiterate what Corb said, I think that people get a little bit too fixated on classes as a whole rather than looking at individual archetypes and what those need to. Because I mean, if you look at something like an Inner Fire combo Priest and maybe a Reno Priest or a Big Priest, like those aren't similar. I mean, they're other than they share the same hero power, right? So and a handful of different cards. So it's like, you know, Inner Fire Priest needs something different than what Big Priest needs. So it's, you know, those, even though they fall within the same class, they're just really separate entities.
Yeah, I mean, I think Reno decks totally need more support. We need like 12 more Zephyruses to be printed. I love this reaction that I'm getting. This is the exact thing that I was hoping, but no. I really hope they don't revisit Highlander mechanics for at least a couple years. Like every time that they've revisited that archetype, it's been ouch. Like it hurts because it pushes the cards that they print that push that archetype have just been so impactful every time they've done it. I feel like that's like if I had to say one archetype that I don't want to get more support, I feel like that's the one. That like I know you're talking about how Reno decks push diversity, but like no more Reno Priest, Reno Lock, Reno Mage support. Like I think they're good for at least a little bit. So.
Yeah, you think they're good? Yeah,
I think they're good for now.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think that like you can push Reno archetypes without pushing Reno cards just by printing high quality cards for classes that have flexible uses. So yeah, no more Reno effects, just good quality cards. I think is fine.
All right, let's talk about the next question here. So with tradable coming in the new set, what archetypes or keywords from other card games would you like to see implemented in Hearthstone in the future? So again,
I'm gonna sit this one out.
Sit this one out.
This anime question.
So I mean, of course, tradable referencing, I guess, cycling as like the most similar mechanic from Magic. I guess the only thing that I would like to see would be like they're different, right? But like enchantments that affect both players, right, for like the rest of the game. And so these have like different words and they work a little bit functionally different in both like Hearthstone or in both Magic and like stuff like Pokemon. But I would like to see stuff like, I don't know, your both players' spells cost one more for the rest of the game, or like kind of these enchantment effects. it's a little bit scary because generally in both of those other games they're kind of hard to interact with, and in Hearthstone, in a game that has even less interaction, I'd be a little bit scared to see how those work. But kind of permanent Weblord and Cult Neophyte-esque effects, I am always down for. I am a person who does like playing taxing effects in multiple card games, so maybe this is just me. But then it could also be like the opposite of tax effects, where like, both players' minions cost one less for the rest of the game, or stuff like that. I don't know how you guys feel about those though.
No, I'm with you. I like messing with what my opponent's doing. I was gonna say like more opponent forced discard would be what I would love, because I'm a mono black gamer and I know that that's something that would be hated in Hearthstone. So I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate for this one, but it's definitely something that I would want to do. I was thinking something along the lines of enchantments as well, but maybe not even necessarily for both players, but just like another zone for enchantments. I was thinking earlier about how this could maybe be implemented, and maybe in the form of like an offhand. That was something that was part of World of Warcraft, where you had your main hand weapon, and then an offhand could either be like a shield or some sort of augment to give you additional spell damage or something like that. So that might be an interesting way that they can explore maybe different. A secondary zone or a new zone within the game to introduce either something to go in your offhand of the hero, or just a separate area where you can set an enchantment, whether it affects one player or both. I think I would be definitely into that, and hopeful that we see that in the future. I think finally the last thing that I would hope that, or that I used to lobby a lot for them introducing to Hearthstone is a graveyard mechanic. And then with something like a big priest where it resurrects something, it actually pulls it out of the graveyard, so that you can't just rip like two resurrects back to back to pull the same minion on turn 5 or so after a Shadow Essence. You're actually pulling that minion from your graveyard, and then it returns there once it dies again. So that would be the only thing. That said, I think that the developers have a history of introducing both interesting new mechanics, as well as bringing in mechanics from other games, or taking inspiration from mechanics from other games in the form of something like Tradable, where it's really kind of flavorfully and neatly wrapped in the Hearthstone game.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of touch on that, I know Ixar has kind of addressed this whole graveyard comment in previous Q&As, where he mentioned with how the game is built now and how the kind of user interface works and functions, it's really hard for them to implement a graveyard. But if they could go back, back in time 6 years ago when they were originally designing Hearthstone, I think it's something that they would have liked to put in the game. But I think at this point it's maybe a little bit kind of too late to do something like that, which is a little bit unfortunate. But yeah, I like everything you suggested except for the forced discard, because you're a mono black gamer. I absolutely hate people like you, so we're gonna hope they don't implement stuff like forced discard. I'm good.
I would be very surprised if they did.
Yeah. And then kind of building off of this, would you make any expansion specific keywords evergreen? I know we talked about this last week, where we were kind of predicting that Tradable could be something like Discover that could eventually become something evergreen. Is there something else that they, have introduced in previous expansions that you would like to see come back, time and time again?
Echo and Inspire, I wouldn't mind, or even to a lesser extent Magnetic, just because we've seen mech decks fall off quite a bit lately. Mechs and Magnetic feels like it's something that can exist outside of Boomsday, so I feel like that's the most likely to be evergreen. We have kind of those awkward non-echo cards as well that, like if it... I understand the reasoning at the time. I feel like their philosophy has changed since then, and if those were released now, they would have echo on them. So I think we've already seen a shift towards more evergreen mechanics. So I think moving forward, we'll probably see more of those. I don't know if we'll go back and grab some of the ones from the previous expansions, like Inspire or whatever, but I wouldn't mind seeing those come back.
Yeah, not quite a keyword, but I would be really down for there to be, dual class cards. brought back heavily. Like, if it was every expansion had dual class cards, I think I'd be pretty satisfied. Like, I just think they're excellent. And so if they revisit that, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, big fan of the dual class cards as well. All right, so let's move on to the last little part of our AMA here. We're going to answer some personal-ish questions. We were a little bit scared. I guess I was a little bit scared of kind of how weird these could have gotten. Turns out you guys weren't weird. Appreciate you guys. I mean, I guess the first question, what are your favorite non-card games? So outside of the realm of Hearthstone and Magic, what other games do you guys enjoy playing, in your off time?
Lately, it's been a lot of TFT. As I get older and have less free time, I feel like roguelites are really where I spend a lot of my time. So things like Risk of Rain. I've been playing Hades lately. Obviously, played a lot of Slay the Spire in my lifetime, just because I like the pick up, play a game, step away, come back at another time, and you're not feeling like you have to figure out where you left off just because, I'm busy. Life interrupts me at different times, so I can more easily do that. In the past, some of my favorite games, single player, have been things like Chrono Trigger on Super Nintendo and Fallout 3. I know that's not the most popular of the Fallout series, but like, I don't know, that was the one that I was able to most engross myself in just because I had the available time to do so. So that was one that I had multiple playthroughs and really, really did enjoy it. So.
Yeah, I'm not really a gamer in the sense that I don't really play much else except for Hearthstone. So if I'm not doing Hearthstone, I'm probably not playing video games. I guess over the past year, the thing that I did the most though was Among Us. Among Us was a ton of fun for me. And it's very much in my domain is like a social strategy sort of game where a lot of manipulation and conversation and things like that. So that was very much in my wheelhouse. I had a great time with Among Us, and then but that's pretty dead at this point. Apart from that, I've recently picked up chess. I know it's not really probably part of the intended question, but I guess it's a game
It's a
that I've
game.
been playing.
Yeah.
It's a game, yeah. So I've been trying to learn chess and just like downloaded the an app and been playing that every like free chance I get for the past month or so. So yeah, it's been good.
What's your rating in chess? Do you want to expose yourself?
Oh no, I've only been playing against like computers and doing puzzles. I don't feel confident enough yet to start going on into ladder or what's the equivalent of ladder? Like I guess I don't know, rated matches, I guess is what you'd call it.
I don't know. Chess is something that like I learned as a kid, but it's never been something that I've like revisited as like I want to say mature, but I'm not mature. Like as an older person, I haven't revisited it since. So, I'm down to learn chess as well. Sounds exciting. Sounds really stressful though because it's like you can't blame RNG when you lose in chess.
I know, right? Yeah, I played perfectly, but my pawn just fell over. I don't know what happened.
I mean, personally, I guess I've been playing some teamfight tactics a lot less recently. Just haven't really been enjoying this like newest expansion in teamfight tactics. Haven't really had the time to invest to learn it. So really, it's been a lot of like single player games. For me, I've been playing a lot of the new Stardew Valley kind of expansion that they had. God, I just spend way too much time in that game anyways. It's on my Switch and my phone, so it's like really easy mobile game as well. When I'm at work or have anything like that. Yeah, so that's kind of it really. It's been a lot of like board games and Magic in person now that like I can actually go out in the real world again. And do stuff. So I've been playing a lot of board games and Magic with friends. So that's kind of really been it. I guess card games are kind of where I'm at right now. Just like it's all I really play, kind of similar to Corbett. All right. So next question: do you guys cook? Are you guys good cooks? And if so, what's your signature dish? Corbett with that hot no. You don't cook at all. Can you even cook like scrambled eggs?
I can do toast. I think I can manage.
Ooh. What about you, Roffle?
Yeah, I do a fair amount of cooking. Probably about 50-50 between my wife and I. So, my strategy is to make it as simple as possible. And so I make use of an air fryer quite a bit. But I do also make a pretty delicious prime rib that I do for my family for holidays. So things like Christmas and Thanksgiving that usually turns out pretty good. I keep they keep asking me to make it every year, so it must be pretty good. And that's something that like if you know what you're doing, it's pretty foolproof. But I don't think I have necessarily a signature dish, but most of the meals that I eat are home cooked. So yeah, I do a lot of cooking and have failed many times to the point where I do so quite a bit less often now. So it's just practice. You just start figuring things out as you go, and nobody really taught me. I just kind of out of necessity started cooking for myself.
Yeah, I mean, I've been into cooking for a while. I always like loved cooking with my mom growing up, and so I can't. Now that I'm living on my own, I like try to cook all these dishes that she cooked, and you realize that like you just can't do it like mom can, right? Like it'll just never be as good. But yeah, I do. My brother and I we do a lot of like American dishes with like Indian spiced palettes and stuff like that. Because like we both know that we just can't do the Indian food, so there's no reason for us to like try because it'll never be as good. So we do kind of an Indian twist on a bunch of other stuff, which is a lot of fun. But every time we do like I guess before the pandemic, whenever we did like potlucks and stuff, it was always like a chicken curry was like always like the thing that was like asked to be brought. So I don't know. The pandemic gave me a lot of time to like learn how to cook. I don't think I got much better, but I did cook a bunch of like different stuff, which is nice. All right, so we'll wrap up our Q&A session with one last question from Jeff. So the first one, he's got 3 individual questions for the 3 of us. So the first one, I guess, targeted towards myself. Tell me about your PhD. God, this question is always so complicated, and I never really know how to answer it because I'm doing something that's like super weird. So I guess most normal PhDs have like a dissertation that you're working towards, like a thesis. I'm kind of doing 2 smaller projects that are kind of completely unrelated. So I'm doing one in developmental biology that's all focused on this. There's this thing on the cell that looks like a little tail that's called the cilia that's like super important for signaling during development. So I'm studying basically how that's built and regulated. And the other project that I work on is all about like education research. So it's all about like secondary like college STEM education, and working on a lot of helping aid underrepresented minorities and all these populations and helping them achieve success in STEM fields. So 2 kind of completely unrelated questions. I know the super basic explanation, and if you guys are interested in more in-depth explanations, just let me know. But it's a lot of work. That's the one thing that I can tell you about the PhD. Balancing that on top of like streaming and stuff like that, I do not get much sleep, which does suck, but it's a lot of fun and I enjoy everything that I'm doing, both like streaming and studying. So I enjoy it. It's worth it. Hopefully, we'll see.
Mouth's insane, guys. Like is actually insane.
Okay, and then Corbett, what eternal deck has the highest skill floor in your opinion? Straight up opinion. Okay. What deck do you think is the highest skill floor? You can play it absolutely terribly and still win a ton of games.
I mean, it's probably the Odd Paladin, right? Like, it's the button deck. Again, skill floor and skill cap aren't really the same thing. You can have a deck that performs well at low ranks that still can get better at higher ranks, but if you're just new to the game or you're not like the most experienced player, as long as you press that button every turn, it's pretty hard to mess up. You can't misplay your cards when you don't actually play cards. So I think it's Odd Pally, which has had an insane win rate at lower ranks when it was in standard. It still performs really well at lower ranks here in Wild. And I guess like others would be a lot of the other Gen and Baku decks, but yeah, Paladin's definitely the standout.
And then the last most important question to Roffle: Water Priest win.
All right, so water archetypes are the combination of Murlocs and Pirates, for those of you that weren't around when Water Rogue was a real thing with Finja ripping a bunch of Murlocs from your deck. I have done each of these archetypes individually. I have done a Murloc Priest, and I have done a Pirate Priest. So I guess it only makes sense that I would eventually get around to doing a full Water Priest. The problem with that is that each of those 2 decks was already really terrible, and I'll probably drive myself insane if I try and merge them into one hybrid deck that is somehow worse than both of the decks were previously. I think with Murlocs, I was doing like a res package to do a pseudo anyfin in priest.
Oh my god.
And it was not good. And then pirates, like obviously, like you just shove stuff at the opponent's face. That might actually be useful now that rally is a card again, because you could like guarantee a Sousy captain. So that could be interesting, but I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I want to bring both of those archetypes together. That might be a little bit too memey for even me.
So what I'm hearing from this is that it's happening soon, right?
TM.
All right, that's gonna wrap it up for our podcast episode today. Thank you guys for submitting all those questions. They were a ton of fun to read through, and I hope you guys enjoyed the kind of more casual second half of the episode. A little bit more fun before we dive back into the serious business that is card reveals next week. And again, Roffle, Corbett, thank you again for joining me. And thanks for submitting yourselves to these deeply personal questions about Hearthstone in your lives. I appreciate y'all. Let the people know where they can find you.
You can find me at RoffleHS on Twitter and Instagram, and at Roffle on Twitch and YouTube.
And you can, of course, find me at Corbettgames on Twitter and Twitch and all that kind of stuff. So thank you guys for listening or watching.
And you guys can find me at GetMeOut on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, all that kind of good stuff. Appreciate all of you guys for listening all the way to the end, and we will see you guys again next week for these brand new card reveals. Super excited for that, and we'll see you guys. Have a good one.